Hi, welcome everyone to Redemption Thursdays with Rabbi Pinchas Winston. I'm Yehuda Shemroth here, and Rabbi Winston's wife is also on, I see, which is great. We usually have Josh Wander, or we prefer to have him on too, but he's been very busy helping people make Aliyah and doing all kinds of wonderful things for Klal Yisrael. So you can check out his website at israeltorah.org. And also you can check the Miriam Project Geula Hour on Facebook. We have a lot of recordings of Rabbi Winston's and also of other people talking about the times that we live in, which is the times of Geula. The Rabbi joins us nearly every week to give us insights into the world events through the eyes of the Torah and helps us prepare for the Geula Shalayma. Tonight's topic is In Search of My True Self, Part 2. And I want to invite everybody to please contact me on the Facebook page or on the Israel Torah YouTube channel. And we have a WhatsApp group with Rabbi Winston's Torahs weekly. This week, of course, Chaya Sarah. He's got a Torah there in commentary. And his goal is to get people to see the inside story on the Parsha through the eyes of the Torah sources and through Kabbalistic sources sometimes, often. And I will look forward to reading his newest book, Don't Panic. So look for that in the Rabbi's Wednesday. No, not. What's that?
That's the second newest book. The newest book is now called Run, Pain, Run.
Oh, I had it reversed. I thought that was the next one. Run, Pain, Run. Look at Rabbi's website, 36.org. I'm so sorry about that. Also, can they get it on Amazon too, or where else can they get it?
Yep.
Amazon. Okay, check Rabbi's website, though. You won't regret it. Thanks, Rabbi, for joining us. As usual, we're looking forward.
Thank you. Okay. Continuing on what we discussed last week about this idea of self-awareness, getting to the essence of who we are, which is everything. Even though history is so big and there's been world wars, and we have the war here in Israel. We have the hostages still to bring back home, Israel, hopefully very soon. There's so many things that are bigger than who we are, much bigger, and they demand our concern. There's no question about that. We have to be involved and be focused on them. But it's obvious that if we're not who we're supposed to be, then the world is out of kilter. The world can't be what it's supposed to be, and it's like crosshairs in a sense that when they line up, so then you're on target. So the same thing is true about a person, is that they have to, in order to be able to live up to their potential, and to be able to accomplish and participate with it. Again, it's either because of us or through us. That's the tikkun is going to come no matter what. God never is delayed, is never interfered with, not stopped. He runs the whole show. And basically that whatever it needs to get done is going to get done exactly down to the millionth of a second. This whatever we do, whatever we accomplish, it's just part of his master plan. He's not, even though he acts as if everything's a surprise to him and that we could either go this way or go that way. But the bottom line is that everything happens, life, death, according to what he says, and nothing else but what he says. The only question is, what role will we play in all of this? Right? The same way a person could die in the that's brought down in the Gemara, different places, different simanim about death. How a person dies makes a big difference in terms of their final judgment and how they're viewed, not just by the people they leave behind, but by Shemayim. And it's a schuz, it's a merit. So if a person wastes time, then even though they might do some meaningful things in their life, they might end up dying while wasting time, doing nothing. It may be maybe even an embarrassing situation. They won't be embarrassed anymore, but the situation won't be nice, right? But if a person is somebody who values their time and understands and appreciates the importance of a moment, so then Hashem will arrange it that they die doing something meaningful. And this is the merit that we have, whether God will plug us in to do something that's important and we get the credit for it, or God forbid the opposite. If someone needs to be hurt or their car needs to be banged, he'll bring a car banger to hit their car. And even though the person who got hit and it was damaged, that's between them and Hashem, because that was a shkacha pratis. Nevertheless, the person who did the damage has to answer to Hashem also for why Hashem could call on them to do this thing. That's just the way it works. And that's why it's brought down that Pirkei Avos, which Ethics of Our Fathers, Mishnayos, which deals with character development and how to become a good person, how to become a God-fearing individual who accomplishes meaningful things, is actually in the section called Nazikim. There are different seders, different sections of the Mishnah, and one is called Nazikim, which means damages, because that's where the laws of damages are found. Where there's, not just damages, but also anything to do that could lead to damage, like for example, contracts and et cetera, et cetera. And it's not the place you expect to put character development, but that's where it is. And the reason why is because that if we cause damage to somebody else, or we're damaged by somebody else, it's all hashgacha pratis, and it has to do with who we are as people. If a person believes their life is random, then obviously accidents can happen and a person could be innocently damaged. But from a Torah perspective, everything is hashgacha pratis. And even though the person might look innocent at the time, innocent overall, sometimes it can span reincarnations. That it happened the way it happened, exactly as it happened for that reason, this way, because of divine providence. And if we are, God forbid, in a situation where we're accomplices to something that even unwittingly that goes wrong, that shouldn't have, from our perspective as a negative event, then we have to ask ourselves why Hashem chose us. What are we doing? What's about our life, how we're living our life, that Hashem feels that He could use us for this negative event? And of course, if we end up becoming a positive factor in a situation, then we should certainly take tremendous pleasure from the fact that we had that merit and try to figure out why we had it, perhaps, so we can increase it, make it better. But this is the starting point. The starting point is getting down to the essence of who you are. And the whole world, if everybody in the world today were to do this, actually do this and take it seriously, at least even the majority, the wars would stop. The crime would stop. The abuse would stop. Because even though there are cases of evil souls, so to speak, that will have to be dealt with and have been over the last couple of thousand years and will until the end. Nevertheless, most people in the world don't have those evil souls, clearly, because everywhere you go, you meet nice people. They have problems, they have issues, they have hang-ups and things like that. But overall, you go from place to place, it's amazing how many nice people there are in the world. So it's just that people get confused and they get caught up in things they shouldn't get caught up in. Their priorities are off because they weren't educated properly, or they have emotional issues that they haven't dealt with. And if people would just be themselves, and you see this, by the way, it's amazing. You can see it in yourself, and you can see it in others, even people who are generally uptight, and they spark it. The first sign of something negative, they have fears. They have dramatic responses to situations, and they're high strung, and they're always causing some type of like intense situation that might cause fighting in the end and people to get hurt in such. But even they, when they have a moment where they're quiet, when they're relaxed, when they're not feeling that way for whatever reason, it might be only once in a while, but even when it does happen, you see, and they're being themselves in essence or close to it, they're a whole different person. It's just that the layers that we put on top of it, depending how many layers you have, again, that just goes to show the importance of raising children and the influence we have as parents, and certainly as teachers and rabbis. I mean, how many stories? It's amazing how. Well, without further ado, moving forward with the material. So after the first thing, next there's what we would call, let's say, self-validation. So you can fool some of the people some of the time, but you have a tough time fooling yourself any of the time. In other words, you can put on a face, you can put on some type of look, and you can appear, you can act a certain way in front of other people, and they can become convinced that you are who you say you are, right? But we know deep inside, and even if we're not conscious of this, that we know, or at least feel, that something's not quite right. And people go along with it. They get used to it. They live that way. That's why insecurity can be an ongoing problem. A person just constantly insecure because they got used to acting this way that's not them, and they don't know how to get out of it. They don't even know that there's something else. They just assume that that's who they are. That's their personality. If they were able to, to go on this journey of self-discovery and get back to the essence of who they are, which, by the way, happens over life automatically to some degree. By the time a person gets older, and you see a lot of times, insecurities lessen, maybe even disappear, because as you get older and you get slower and life becomes more philosophical, then you tend to start to realize that certain things that bothered you. Someone said that it's an idea that for the first 20 years of my life, I thought that everybody was talking about me. And the second 20 years of my life, I thought that just most people were talking about me. And the last 20 years of my life, or at least the next 20 years of my life, I realized that nobody was ever talking about me. And it's a great statement. It's a great idea, because so much is made up and based upon what people expect from us, and then what we expect from ourselves because of what people expect from us. So we're always seeking some type of validation, self-validation. And even though we tend to pursue it from other people, the one person who needs to validate us the most is ourself. That's when we know, we feel good. The expression in modern day terms is being comfortable in your skin, right? But that can, that's not always what people are doing. A lot of times people, they think that they are, but they're not really, or they might be, because there are people who are very much in touch with who they are because of the way they were brought up, or at least their discovery, or they had some type of crisis that forced them to do this type of a thing. And we need it. We live for it. And it's unfortunately, so many people think that the reason why they feel it's never enough is because they believe that the validation is something that has to come from outside, when in fact it's really what has to come from the inside. So when a person disconnects themselves from the validation of others, that will come later on. Once you become who you are, it'll be much easier to get the validations from others in the end. So it's as if we people travel the time, but though others may have a difficult time seeing through our act, we don't. It's as if we have a built-in lie detector, which we do, called the soul, and we cannot turn it off as long as we are living. So that's you can't escape it. And God made it. We're wired that way specifically because God wants us to be who we are. He didn't create us to be something that we're not, and then say joke's on you. He wants a relationship with a person, and that means with the person, and that means being who you are in essence. So therefore, the soul, which is the soul can't lie. The soul is 100% knowledge. It's 100% truth. It's a spark of God. So therefore, inside the body, it's going to, if something doesn't resonate with the soul, you're going to know about it at some level, conscious, unconscious. The result is that it hurts. We do not take kindly to being forced to do things we do not want to do, and eventually rebel. The same thing is true when the compulsion comes from within us, right? And rebellion against that can show up in many forms, from insecurity to mental illness. Mental health is completely dependent upon being who we are in essence. And that's really, that's a very simple statement. We have so much going on in the world to deal with mental illness, but it's thousands of years down the road. Mankind has been lost ever since he left the Garden of Eden. In the beginning, he knew more, right? But overall, we've been wandering, all through history and responding to the situation and the environment, and ultimately speaking, trying to avoid pain, physical pain, as much as possible. Well, true, there's mental pain as well. And that's come at a very high cost of not taking the time to find out who we are in essence. So this is what it says in Tehillim: not so the wicked, rather they are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not survive judgment, nor will sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For God cherishes the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked is doomed. Okay, but how do you be that when you're constantly being told by others who you are, or what you are like, or what you should be like? People are, from the moment the baby's born, it's just like people are. He looks like this. She looks like that. They behave like that. He's got your temperament. She's got her temperament. It's like we're pitting. We don't know nothing yet. We're always trying to categorize people and put them into compartments and trying to find ways to be able to to size them up. And then when they're old enough to understand, we start to impose it upon them. How many times the parents tell children, "You're this, you're that," and it might be true, but it might also not be true. But the person starts to identify that way and associate with that. As a result of that, they become confused about who they are as well. So how do you be your essential self if you were never told you have one, or about how easy it is to never become it? No wonder people spend so much time and money on ways to distract themselves away from their inner confusion and pain. I mean, you can size up a society basically by how much time and money and energy they spend on distraction, be it food, be it clothing, be it entertainment itself, whatever it takes. People take painkillers, people take antidepressants. That's a pill, it's direct to try to deal with pain that they're suffering. But the same thing is true with most of us when we go to, obviously being entertained and having a good laugh is a healthy thing. Laughter is important in life, and being uplifted and inspired is very important in life. But too much of it really is what people run to because they live with a daily pain, a daily sense of lack of importance. And to fill that gap, right, they'll turn to things, what we call comfort food or comfort entertainment or comfort situations and vacations. It's all part of that. And that sums up a society. So people may call it entertainment, but really it is just just a complex distraction. So at least religious people grow up with the idea of a Yetzer Hara and a Yetzer Tov. That's important. Right? That's hugely important. But if you were told that your roommate is a murderer who tries to kill you every day, wouldn't you find ways to move out or at least be on guard? Right? For sure. Yet that is what the Gemara says about the Yetzer Hara in no uncertain terms. And still people remain overly buddy-buddy with it. That's how good it does its job. The Yetzer Hara. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on in more detail. So this is why even Torah and mitzvahs are no guarantee that a person won't fall prey to the Yetzer Hara. On the contrary, the Yetzer Hara knows how to operate from within Torah and mitzvahs. There's a concept called a from Yetzer Hara. Right? There's the classic Yetzer Hara, which is basically just taking advantage of people's naivety and try to inspire them to do any kind of sin they possibly can. But the Yetzer Hara also knows that some people are impervious to such temptations, but it doesn't give up. And on the contrary, as we say, the greater the person, the greater the Yetzer Hara, the stronger the Yetzer Hara, because otherwise there's no challenge. Since life is for the sake of free will, we're here to use free will. Free will demands challenge. If you've overcome certain challenges in life, that's no longer a challenge, and therefore there's no free will involved anymore. If someone decides that they're going to keep kosher when in fact they had not yet until this day, it's a struggle. And they may have to fight against themselves a fair bit until they finally make the commitment. But once they've made that commitment and that's the way they're living, they can't not possibly keep kosher anymore. They can't eat treif, even if they're hungry. So at that point in time, that stops being a test for them. So the Yetzer Hara has to move on. So it can be that it makes a person learn a little bit longer. Watch this. A little bit longer, knowing the person knows that if they don't go to bed by a certain time, then tomorrow morning, by Shachris, they'll have difficult having Kavanah for Shemona Esrei. We're going to be talking to God. God wants us to learn. Learning Torah is all important to God. It's the crux of everything that we do. It is the only way to really live in this world properly. Yet, part of the Torah is a mitzvah to take care of yourself. So a person, people have gotten sick. People have pushed themselves too much. I remember, in my early years when I was first learning, and we used to have certain bochur, who they got this burst of inspiration to try to really push themselves, and they would stay up till 2:00 in the morning learning, right? And then you didn't see them the next morning. They just couldn't get out of bed the next morning. And if they did get out of bed the next morning on time and came to Shachris, they were half asleep during davening, and during the shir, they fell asleep. And at that point in time, the Rav would go over and say, "Listen, you have to know that that this is not the way to go. Even though it's a great thing and staying up late and shows your drive to learn Torah, but nevertheless, it's having a negative effect." I had once. I remember one time I had decided that we were learning, and I wanted to go through all the Mishnayos, all of Shas, the Mishnayos, and that took a fair bit of time for me to do. So I was taking a lot of time to do that. It was cutting into my preparation time for Gemara. So when I came to the Shir, I didn't really quite follow what was going on. And my Rebbe picked up on that at some point. And after the shir was over, he pulled me aside and he said, listen, not a good thing, right? Your shir is the priority. Preparing for the shir is your priority. It's a great thing. One day you should do it. Learning all of Mishnah is fantastic. And if you can do it in the way that you learn the Mishnah and can prepare for your Gemara shir, fine. That's great. That's wonderful. That's what you should do. But if it's coming at the cost of your chavrusa, who you have to learn with, and coming to shir and know what's flying, then it's not the time. It's not the thing to do right now. So the Yetzer Hara, and we'll talk about what it comes down to. What is the Yetzer Hara itself? In essence, also, because this is really what's a problem. It's a scourge of all of society. I mean, people like Freud came along and said there's no such thing as Yetzer Hara. It's just the way we are. Man has these tendencies, and he does. It's true, but he has a Yetzer Hara, right? And it's very easy to confuse yourself with the Yetzer Hara. So a person could think that when they have a desire to do something that they know is wrong, and it's kind of bugging them inside, but the drive is strong. They think it's them, and there's nothing. They're not violating themselves until after, of course, the act is done, and they might ask themselves, "What was I thinking?" Well, you weren't. That wasn't you. That was the Yetzer Hara taking over your brain and you falling for it. So, society, for a while, it wasn't like that. Even in the Christian world, the idea of an angel on one shoulder, the devil on the other shoulder, people understood there was this inner struggle, but it was still, forward, it was outside of people. And even though people knew about these things, they didn't understand how to properly implement that strategy and that philosophy as the Torah comes to promote. Because the Gemara says that Hashem made the Yetzer Hara, and he made the Torah as its tavlin, as its spice. Now that's often translated as antidote, right? I've seen books that write about the fact that the Torah is the antidote. But the idea of an antidote is it cancels out the poison. That's the whole point. The poison is dangerous, and the antidote comes to fix it. But the Gemara doesn't say that. The Gemara calls it a tavlin. And the idea of a tavlin is that it comes not to cancel out, but to enhance. It takes something that's not that good and makes it better. So it's telling us basically that the Torah is a way to channel the energy of the Yetzer Hara in a meaningful way. And that's very important. Because other than the fact that it comes to push us, ultimately speaking, it's been said by many great rabbanim, that the Yetzer Hara is one of the best chavrusas you'll ever have. If you know how to work with it, right? We spoke with the Chafetz Chaim, who got up early in the morning, and his Yetzer Hara said to him, "You shouldn't be up this early, right?" And he said, "Yeah, if you're up, that's a chavrusa. That's like a chavrusa, even though it's not the one you would choose. Not to, if you had a choice, you wouldn't choose it. That's not the one I want to learn with. But if a person understands what it is, what it's doing, how it works, then you can actually use it to your advantage. And ultimately speaking, even turn it around, as David HaMelech did. It says that his Yetzer Hara died within him. But it's not so much that it died, he still had a Yetzer Hara, but it didn't bother him anymore. On the contrary, he found ways to use the energy of the Yetzer Hara and channel it in the proper direction. Because it's an amazing thing. I mean, this is a personal example that I've found works a lot of times, but sometimes you don't feel like learning, right? But you should. You need to learn, early in the mornings like that, and your body just, you want to. Your rutzah is there, your will is there, but your body doesn't feel like doing it. It's very hard to do things when your body's not into something. People are kvetching, kicking, they scream because they don't want to. I don't feel like doing it. I want to do it, like my Rosh Hashiv used to say. Do you want to do it, or do you feel like doing it, or do you want to do it? That's important for good or for bad. But it's an amazing thing how a cup of coffee and a piece of cake can get the Yetzer Hara inside, and it won't complain. It won't fetch. Even becomes fun. After a while, the Yetzer Hara looks forward to learning because he knows he's going to get a cup of coffee and a piece of cake. It's not the best way to lose weight, but it is a good way to get yourself going in the morning sometimes to learn. And that's why very often people do that. I don't suggest smoking. Things like that, are too unhealthy. But people, you have to know how to work with the Yetzer Hara. There are kosher, healthier ways to do that. But this is what it means to turn into a chavrusa. So we need to know who we really are so we can validate ourselves. A quote from something that when I saw the elderly person struggling to get across the streets while the light was still green, I instinctively ran to help him. He was surprised at first, but so grateful in the end. Leaving him safely on the sidewalk, I continued on my way feeling better about me. I had surprised myself by reacting so quickly to the situation as if it was the kind of thing I always do. I smiled and thought to myself, I didn't know I had it in me. It's so nice to see that I do. So sometimes, right, it is easier to figure out who we are by first identifying who we're not. Okay, next section, the brain. The brain is one of the most fascinating things in the entire universe. It is also an enigma. We get very excited about how much computing we can do using such tiny devices, but the brain remains far more impressive considering what it does given its size. And the brain is the most fantastic thing in the world, especially since you can't even see the circuitry. There's nerves, obviously, and synapses and all these different things that make the brain work properly. But this gray matter, when Einstein died, the person who was responsible for the autopsy actually kidnapped his brain, stole his brain, and then cut it up into pieces and sent it to different scientists around the world to analyze, to find out why Einstein was such a genius in the end. And they didn't really, last I knew, they didn't find anything significant except for the fact that maybe he had a little extra gray matter that others didn't have, but didn't really tell them that much in the end. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, that what the brain can do, the multitasking it does, and so naturally and so comfortably inside a small little head. It's true. And unless you say, yeah, but there's computers that compute huge numbers. So you can go online and you can see documentaries about autistic, autistic adults even, right, who are savant, meaning that they're especially capable of accomplishing tremendous feats. And there's one that I actually saw where the person was able to memorize the entire telephone book first time through. Absolutely remarkable. And another person who was reciting a number by memory that took them 9 hours to hear and record number by number by number by number. Mind-boggling, absolutely mind-boggling. The stories are countless. I actually met someone once who was this way, and he was the sweetest person in the world. And he was, I didn't know who he was, in the beginning and what he was able of accomplishing. But just a very nice guy, very sweet. But you could see that he had an issue. And I only later on found out that he was the head of the accounting for his father's large company because of his mathematical ability. So when they tried to explain things like this, at least I've read or heard that it has to do with the fact that our brains, a healthy brain, has all the sections are functioning and working together, hopefully in synchrony, that they can accomplish all the things that we need to do: move the hands, think, blink your eyes, and all the various different things. Since the brain's involved in so many different things at one time, that we can't do a lot of things excellent, or at least in a superlative way, but well enough to get by. But sometimes in situations like this, where someone might be autistic or part of the brain is not functioning properly, so then all the energy can be used by one part of the brain, and which allows it to excel and do accomplish. They may lack social skills because that part of the brain is not functioning properly. But because that isn't, and the other part of the brain is, so then it compensates, and they can do things that the average person can't do, and you just stand there with your mouth open in complete awe of what the brain can accomplish, right? So, but the brain remains okay. Recent findings even suggest that part of its functioning, like long-term memory, is actually metaphysical. I was watching one thing about a doctor sent me once showing a bunch of doctor scientists who were analyzing the brain, and they couldn't find anywhere in the brain that seemed to be the source of long-term memory. Short-term memory, yes, but long-term memory, no. And I've seen things in the past to do with this, and the suggestion is that memory might take place outside the brain. Where, right? Well, we talk about the spiritual realm. So those people who don't want to use the word spiritual because that implies religion and God, is like that, they use the word metaphysical. mean, we know. I mean, we know, for example, with the concept of entanglement, that the physical world is not the way we understand it to be, or we see it to be. We're learning, through quantum mechanics and quantum field theory, things like that, on a daily basis, that the physical makeup of reality is very different on a subatomic level versus the one that we see. And things can, occupy the same space at the same time, even though they really should be able to, because of the rules of space and time and place, right? So it's breaking down, and so we're only surprised to find these. I mean, not the religious world. I mean, we've been saying it the entire time through, but the scientific world is only surprised. I once saw a document on physics, quantum mechanics. Stuff interests me for this reason, especially. And it was talking about how, until theoretical physics came around, which is around let's say the early 1900s, moving towards the middle 1900s, that science would make discoveries, and then the philosopher would have to sit down and figure out how that fit into the philosophy of life and creation. So first came the discovery, then came the philosopher, right? But as science became more theoretical, because we went beyond the physical world, but beyond what our microscopes could look at and analyze, and then it became basically almost like a process of elimination to try to explain phenomena that we were seeing but did not fit into the rules as we had previously known them. So then it became very theoretical, and as it did, it started to have tremendous implications about the fabric of reality. So the scientist was saying, now when the scientist makes the discovery, he climbs to the top of the mountain, so to speak, to find out what's really going on. He finds the philosopher already sitting there. In other words, philosophy for the longest time has his existence since man was created, obviously, because you're always going to deal with the issue at some point in time. Why are we here? And what are we supposed to do with ourselves? So again, a lot of people gave up on that question. They don't feel it's necessary. Life just became too distracting to ask it. But, you see, even not just religious people, all the truth is, back in the 1800s, everybody was somehow connected to the church. But they asked the questions. Rousseau and all the other philosophers dealt with issues like this because it was on their mind, because they wanted to know, because it was an honest desire to try to figure it out. And the great thing about philosophy is it's philosophical. You don't have to have empirical evidence necessarily to back it up or to make the statement, because we have a tradition. We were told. It's part of our understanding of how God made the world. God gave us a certain amount of input, especially at our Sinai, and that information. And of course, you get to Kabbalah; it's a whole different story. Kabbalah is one of the best kept secrets, and there's a good reason why, because it's supposed to be. And even if aside from, even it's coming out, people are learning it now today, but it's also very complicated to learn. Just like, for example, quantum mechanics. The Havdalah is also a very well-kept secret. It's the basis of all physical life. How many people even know it exists, or what it is, or how it functions? And it's a secret, but not because no one can't find out about it, but because it's so complicated and so detailed that the average person is not interested and doesn't want to take the time to learn how to learn it. The same thing is true of Kabbalah, that it's there, it's available. Some people have told me over the years, yeah, it's not for me. I took a look, it wasn't for me, but I don't really, I mean, it's not that I don't buy it. It's possible, but chances are that they can't really know for sure, because they never really made the proper effort to go into it. It is an avoda. There's no question about that. Even if you learn Gemara day and night, and the Rishonim, the Achronim, the Poskim, all the different sources, from cover to cover, still it's a different world of thought. It's amazing. It's amazing how, just like, for example, general physics is very simple. You throw an apple, gravity brings it back down. And I mean, gravity itself is not such a simple force to understand, but you can find ways to diagram it and understand it and put it into equations. Quantum mechanics, quantum theory goes further, and it goes deeper, and it becomes murkier, more murky. And as a result of that, it becomes very difficult and confusing to wade through it. So people just give up. They're not interested in the first place. It takes a certain type of mind to do that. Anyhow, Technical marvels aside, the brain is the basis of all human behavior, even instinct. There are three levels of brain. There's like the primitive brain, and there's the one above that, and the brain, different functions to accomplish different things. Therefore, anyone wishing to unravel the mysteries of strange behavior has to deal with the brain and how it works. As technology advances, it becomes easier to theorize about certain brain functions and verify or discount others. They know how someone becomes a sociopath. We've opened the brain up. I mean, they've been doing this for over hundreds of years. Anytime anybody did anything that was weird and they either got killed or they died, they would open the brain up, but they didn't have to look for it. They didn't understand necessarily what was missing or what was additional to cause these type of things. But today it's a different story. We've mapped the brain tremendously with all the technology we have to do that. The problem for society are such damaging people. The problem for society are such damaging people, but they are easier to understand and detect. It is the people that society ignores because of their normalcy that are harder to understand because their brains show no signs of damage per se. Yet the Gemara says a person does not sin unless a spirit of insanity enters them. Right? That it does. I mean, sin takes place all over the world. People, even righteous people, as Shlomo Melech said, they make mistakes. They do sins. People sometimes succumb to temptation, even if they don't do it every single day all the time. A lot depends upon divine providence. A lot depends upon the circumstances and how your mental well-being at that moment in time. A person, for example, can have a very rough day, be very worn out. It's amazing how you wouldn't think to daven a certain way, like very fast and with very, very little kavana, because it's not proper. You're talking to God. There are rules. There are halachas. You have to have respect. You have to show that you love God. You have to try and connect to Him. But if you've been traveling for a whole day and you are just worn out, right? You have no energy left. And the fact that you were able to get there to shul at all and open a siddur and say the words, maybe have a little kavanah once in a while, you're okay. Because from your perspective, that was good enough given the circumstances. If you did the same thing when you're feeling perfectly fine, you just were in a rush, had no patience, and you did anyhow, you feel bad because you know it's not right. If you do it often enough, you stop feeling bad, unfortunately. But this is the reality of everyday life. So people are walking around insane, but obviously not insane like we call insane, right? Even in a court of law, secular court of law, a person can plead temporary insanity. They were incensed at that moment in time, and they lost control of themselves and did something very bad they shouldn't have done. And the courts analyze and see if that's the case, if it's possible, to determine whether or not he's actually as guilty as he seems to be. It's not always so easy to get off that type of a thing, especially if you're sitting there right now acting quite normal. But all day long, everywhere you go, people are doing things that just don't make sense. That's a form of insanity. But because it's easier, it's more comfortable to give in to a temptation. Just again, a simple example that everybody relates to because it's such a common thing. You see your friend sitting there eating their second piece of chocolate cake, and you say to them, "But you told me you're on a diet." And they're going, yeah, as they eat it, feeling terribly guilty. I don't, you understand. See, at that point in time, you stop, right? But someone might push it. I don't get it. You told me so many times how you wanted to lose weight and go to diet, and you're doing so well, and all of a sudden here you're having, so it doesn't make sense. Are you okay? Are you mentally stable? So, because it's so natural, so normal for people to break their diets, we don't consider it to be a thing of insanity. But how many times do people feel terrible after? How many times? Someone I was talking to, talk about different things that inspire us to get out of bed in the morning early, because a lot of times you get up in the morning, you don't feel like it. So, and one person mentioned, he said, it's always hard. It's always hard. But at one point in time, I got to this point where not getting it on time, I'm when I'm lying there and I'm feeling I want to sleep longer, I will sleep in and daven later this time. I remember how I feel like I wasted my day, how I failed to get up on time. And the fact that I feel so, I can feel that at that time, even before I feel that way, gets me out of bed in the morning. Because I know I've experienced that disappointment enough now to know this is not something I want to do, even though I feel like doing it right now. And very often people sometimes, at the break, they fail their diet 15 times, but the 16th time they succeed because enough is enough already. And they realize it. But this idea of insanity is something that the Torah makes a big deal about, because a person in their right mind would not sin. As again, my Rosh Hashiva used to say, a lot of chachma, a lot of wisdom, a lot of ways to express things that were made the point. He said, imagine someone walks up to you one day and says, I get a mazel tov. Oh, you're a child, a grandchild? No. I didn't cut off my finger. Why, you have a dangerous job? No. I'm saying I didn't cut off my finger. You think about that? That's like on your mind. You like that's a consideration. Because if it is, I need to take you somewhere to get some serious psychological help. There's no mazel tov for that. There's a phone number with a psychiatrist or a psychologist to help you out, because that's not normal. That's crazy. Who would inflict themselves with damage like that? So that's the same thing by sinning. That's the same thing by following the Yetzer Hara. Who in their right mind would do a thing like that? But we do it anyhow, and we accept it. And it's amazing, by the way, when everyone's doing it anyhow, and we tend to gravitate towards people who are like us. It's amazing how it becomes acceptable, even though it's like the child whose mother says, "Do not take that cookie. If you do, there's going to be a punishment." The child thinks about it. The mother goes away. She goes outside the house for a little bit. He says, "Now's my chance." He looks at the cookie jar to see if he can take one without making it look like one was taken, right? And he goes and he looks around. He goes to reach into the cookie jar, and sure enough, his mother walks in at that time and says, "What are you doing? I told you not to take a cookie." And he freezes, right? If he doesn't have a heart attack first, right? And he freezes. And as he's standing there getting caught, his mind is, what was I thinking? What was I thinking? Like why was it worth this? No, it wasn't worth this. And this is what goes on every day in life all over the world. So psychologists are not interested in such people because A, their behavior is common, and B, society doesn't have higher standards of living. Instead, such average people attract the attention of the religious world, whose standards are God-given and who believe that man can be and is meant to be better. You are not a sinner, they preach, just someone who sins. The big difference, right? To be a sinner is to accept the fact this is my way of life. You adopt and adapt that philosophy into your life, and you accept it, and you live, below standard. But to say that I'm somebody who sins means that it's not me. In essence, that's not who I am. I'm better than that. And I should be better than that. And the reason why I fail is because I have this thing called the Yetzer Hara. So making the separation, right, that's the first stage. Understanding, acknowledging that's what it is, then I'm at least able to say that's not me. And when I'm doing it, at least know it's not what I want to do. Because that's the first step to getting out of it and not doing it ever again the rest of your life. Okay, but who is doing the sinning? Someone inside the sinner had to think about doing it and to decide to act on it. People only have one brain. They all seem to work the same way. If my brain is the origin of the idea and the discussion to sin, then doesn't that make me the sinner? The answer is, well, yes and no. The Gemara says that no one in their right mind sins, so a sinner must be in their wrong mind when they commit it. But if by wrong mind we mean that the brain stops functioning properly, then we're back to talking about defective brains, albeit temporary ones. That's what the court calls temporary insanity, and who they send for psychological testing. So then, B'ezras Hashem, next week we'll talk about the idea of the human computer and how the brain works and why it's as confusing it is and how to start fixing and solving the problem. Have a good Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom.
Rabbi, thank you very much. I just want to ask you a question, though, for next week. So the person who can't control themselves for learning, or the person can, That's not everybody, obviously. It's a small subset of all of us who are listening. The people who can't control their diets and their whatever. We're going to get to the point where we can see, like, why are they doing this? This is what
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah, that's coming up. That's coming up.
Got it. Okay, good. Thank you so much, Rabbi. As usual, it was fantastic. And everybody, please tell your friends about this. Join the WhatsApp group and go to 36.org. Good Shabbos, Rabbi. And Mazal Tov on your newest granddaughter.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lots of nachas. Take care.
Amen.
Bye-bye.
Amen.